Laughter cut through the narrow airplane cabin like something sharp and careless, echoing just loud enough to be heard over the hum of the engines, and in that moment the single father felt smaller than the cramped seat he was sitting in, smaller than the worn backpack at his feet, smaller than the tired hope he carried onto that flight. He had boarded the plane with nothing but a child asleep against his shoulder, a past he couldn't outrun, and a future he was still trying to believe in, never imagining that this ordinary flight would become the turning point of his life. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet strength that the world often overlooks, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel, Lonely Dad Strong Heart. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The single dad had chosen the cheapest seats at the back of the plane, the kind that came with stiff cushions and limited legroom, because every extra dollar mattered when you were raising a child alone. His son, barely 6 years old, slept with his head tilted awkwardly against his chest, trusting him completely in that innocent way only children can. The father hadn't slept much the night before. Life hadn't been gentle with him lately. Years ago, a sudden loss had taken his wife away, leaving him with grief, responsibility, and a child who looked at him like he was the entire world. Since then, he had learned how to survive on little sleep, stretch small paychecks, and smile even when his heart felt heavy. Across the aisle, a man in an expensive suit leaned back comfortably, scrolling through his phone with the ease of someone who had never had to count coins before buying coffee. He carried himself with confidence, the kind born from power and money, the kind that made him believe the world was designed to accommodate him. When his gaze drifted toward the back row and landed on the exhausted father and his child, something cruel flickered across his face. The child shifted in his sleep, accidentally kicking the suited man's armrest, and that was enough. The laughter came then, followed by a few smug remarks muttered under his breath, loud enough to sting. The rich man shook his head, as if amused by the sight of a man struggling to juggle parenthood and poverty in a public space. He made it clear, through his expressions and tone, that he believed some people simply didn't belong in certain places. The single dad heard it all. He always did. Years of being judged had sharpened his awareness. But he didn't respond. He simply adjusted his son's position, whispering calm reassurance even though the boy was asleep, choosing dignity over confrontation. As the plane climbed higher, memories filled the father's mind. He remembered a time when his hands had been steadier, his back straighter, his smile easier. Before loss. Before responsibility became something heavy rather than proud. He remembered uniforms, discipline, and long nights where the stakes were life and death. But those memories stayed buried. The world only saw what was in front of them now, a tired single dad in worn clothes, flying economy class, trying to keep his child comfortable. The man in the suit continued to make small, dismissive gestures, rolling his eyes whenever the child stirred, smirking when turbulence caused the father to grip the armrest a little tighter. To him, this was entertainment. A reminder of how far above he believed himself to be. He had built companies, fired people without hesitation, and was used to being admired, feared, and obeyed. Compassion wasn't something he practiced often. Time passed, and the cabin lights dimmed slightly as the flight settled into its journey. The father closed his eyes for a moment, letting the steady vibration of the aircraft lull him into a half-rest. His mind drifted, not to dreams, but to responsibilities waiting at the other end of the flight. A new job interview. A possible fresh start. A chance to give his son something better. This flight mattered more than anyone around him knew. Then, without warning, the atmosphere changed. The smooth hum of the engines shifted into something strained and uneven. The plane trembled, not the gentle turbulence passengers were used to, but something deeper, more unsettling. A quiet ripple of anxiety spread through the cabin as passengers exchanged uneasy glances. The single dad opened his eyes instantly, alert in a way that surprised even him. His body remembered things his mind tried to forget. The plane dipped slightly, then corrected itself. Overhead compartments rattled. A few passengers gasped. Flight attendants moved with forced calm, their faces tight with concentration. The suited man's smile faded as he looked around, suddenly aware that money and status meant nothing at 30,000 feet. Moments later, the captain's voice came through the speakers, not with the rehearsed confidence passengers expected, but with urgency barely held in check. There was a serious technical issue. Systems were failing. The aircraft needed immediate assistance, and the crew was asking if there was anyone on board with specific high-level flight experience. The words sent a chill through the cabin. Panic bloomed fast. People clutched armrests, whispered prayers, pulled out phones even though there was no signal. The rich man's face went pale. His hands trembled as he loosened his tie, suddenly stripped of the armor his wealth usually provided. For the first time, he looked at the single dad not with mockery, but with the same fear reflected in his own eyes. The father felt his heart pound, but his fear was focused, controlled. He gently shifted his son, ensuring the boy was still asleep, then carefully secured him with the seatbelt. His movements were calm, deliberate. Years ago, in another life, chaos had been something he ran toward, not away from. He had trained for moments like this, though he had never expected them to find him here, on a commercial flight, with his child beside him. As the plane shook again, stronger this time, the father felt a pull inside him, a responsibility larger than himself. Not just to his son, but to every soul trapped in that metal tube hurtling through the sky. He stood, steadying himself against the seatbacks as startled passengers watched. There was no dramatic announcement, no heroic pose. Just a quiet decision made by a man who had once sworn to protect lives, even at the cost of his own. Crew members noticed him immediately. Something in his posture, in the way he moved through the chaos, marked him as different. Trained, capable. While others froze, he advanced, eyes sharp, mind already assessing possibilities. He identified himself, offering credentials from a past he rarely spoke about. A past where he had been trusted with machines far less forgiving than this plane. In the cockpit, the situation was dire. Instruments flickered. Alerts blared. The aircraft was losing critical control functions. The captain and first officer were skilled, but this wasn't a scenario they had trained for extensively. When the single dad stepped in, his presence brought a strange sense of calm. Not arrogance. Not bravado. Just experience. Back in the cabin, the suited man watched in disbelief as the same person he had laughed at moments earlier was now being relied upon by the crew. The realization hit him like a blow. He had judged a book by its cover and found himself terribly wrong. The single dad wasn't weak. He wasn't lesser. He was someone forged by loss, responsibility, and discipline, someone who carried strength quietly. Minutes stretched into eternity as the aircraft battled gravity and malfunctioning systems. The single dad worked alongside the crew, his voice steady, his decisions precise. Every action was measured, every risk calculated. He thought of his son, sleeping just rows away, unaware of how close the world was to changing forever. That thought fueled him, sharpened his focus. Failure was not an option. Gradually, control was regained. Not fully, but enough. Enough to stabilize. Enough to attempt an emergency landing. The plane descended, every second heavy with tension. Passengers held their breath as the ground rushed closer. Some cried silently. Others clutched hands, strangers united by fear and hope. When the wheels finally touched the runway, the impact was rough but survivable. The aircraft skidded, engines screaming, until it slowed to a stop. For a moment, there was silence. Then, relief exploded through the cabin in sobs, gasps, and quiet prayers of gratitude. The single dad returned to his seat as quietly as he had left it. He checked on his son first, who stirred but remained safe, blinking sleepily. The father exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Around him, people stared with awe, some whispering thanks, others simply overwhelmed. The suited man sat frozen, shame written across his face. As emergency crews approached and passengers prepared to disembark, the rich man finally stood. His confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and human. He looked at the single dad, really looked at him, and the weight of his earlier cruelty crushed him. No words could undo what he had done, but the lesson was carved deep into his conscience. He had laughed at a hero because he didn't look like one. The single dad didn't seek recognition. He didn't tell his story. He simply gathered his belongings, lifted his son into his arms, and waited patiently. He had done what needed to be done. That was enough. As they walked off the plane, the world felt different. Fragile, but also full of possibility. The father held his son a little tighter, grateful for the chance to keep moving forward. Life would still be hard. Money would still be tight. But something had shifted. Proof that even when the world underestimates you, your strength still matters. If this story is touching your heart right now, please pause for a second and comment below what moment hit you the hardest. Your words matter, and they help build a community around empathy and understanding. Outside the aircraft, under the open sky, the single dad took a deep breath. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew who he was. A father, a survivor, a protector. And that was more than enough. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you not to judge others by appearances, please like this video, share it with someone you care about, and stay connected with Lonely Dad's Strong Heart. Your engagement keeps these stories alive and reminds the world that quiet strength still exists.